If I can't keep my head held high enough, I'll just speak love and watch the smiles come, bring my spirits up. There's some shit I like to fix, but I still know that I'm blessed.
Welcome back to my channel and my coverage of Kristin Smart. I'm going to cover day 3 and 4 of the Kristin Smart trial. And her family was the first to take the stand. The court resumed after another health delay. Before I cover what happened in court the last 2 days of the Pual and Ruben Flores trial for the murder of Kristin Smart, I have a few more tidbits from the trial and the local scene, etc. to cover. I often speak about feeling close to Kristin and a need for justice for her and all who loved her. Here you can listen to what some of other locals had to say. Some of these interviews are done in front of James Murphy's law office, who's represented the Smart family in civil matters related to Kristin's murder all along. He's a wonderful man and highly regarded in our local community. I have also done episodes in front of the Murphy's law firm. The Murphy's office is only blocks away from Susan's home, so every time Susan drives down her own street, she goes past the billboard that remains in front of the Murphy's office. All these years. We still need to recover her remains.
Crazy that we're finally here. I'm glad that we're finally here. I feel like, the Smart family is going to have closure soon. And hopefully justice is brought to, who the guilty party is.
I remember the thing that was the most frustrating was it felt like there was a good amount of evidence, but it was just handled poorly with the local police.
All my family knows about the case. It's kind of hard not to.
You notice that I always refuse to speak ill of Kristin. She is not here to defend herself. And I know she wasn't an angel, but to me it appears she was pretty much a typical college freshman. And the testimony being revealed so far suggests the same, although the defense attorneys want to make it seem like whatever happened to her was her own fault.
He went after the character of Kristin Smart. I think that the city of San Luis Obispo, or the area, San Luis Obispo County, really sort of holds Kristin Smart in high esteem, right? And I think, and I even posted that on my social media yesterday. There was a lot of backlash from my viewers and followers that were talking about, him going after her character, if you will. Yeah. I was kind of a bit surprised about that.
Smart's disappearance and the investigation into Pual Flores over the decades has kept locals here in California's Central Coast on pins and needles leading up to this big trial.
I have some information regarding Ruben's defense, where his attorney claims that over the years, Ruben has been harassed and chased around the community. And he mentioned some incidents, and I know of 2 myself, where he was confronted at Walmart and asked where Kristin was. It escalated and the police were called and everything. It made it to the paper. That was years ago, or the local news. And then also, he was a volunteer at the Clark Center, which is a performing arts center. And ironically, one of my first location episodes was done there because evidence was tossed into the dumpster there. And the dogs hit on that, which is interesting because it's in between Cal Poly and Ruben's home. Ruben had knowledge of the place from also being a volunteer, and in the middle of the night, there's nobody in the region. You can see all those details when you see the location in my video. Ruben's defense attorney also covered the confrontation when Stan Smart went to Ruben's 710 White Court home in Arroyo Grande. To think Kristin was most likely buried nearby when Stan was there just gives me chills. Ruben's defense painted Ruben as a former Navy man. He volunteered at Redondo Beach Police Department. He was a volunteer at the Pismo Jazz Festival. I also know he volunteered at the Clark Center, as I mentioned before. Basically, Ruben's defense says there's no evidence against him. And apparently he's just an amazing, wonderful, upstanding citizen. It's interesting that no citizens I know in this whole community or this county agree. I even have knowledge of former neighbors that used to be on Ruben's side and slowly but surely over time change their mind.
Through this front door, as we all do, he's hanging out in the hallway when the judge kicks us out of the courtroom. He's just mingling about, as you know, he doesn't seem too affected by this. His former wife, Susan, not with him today, and Porter sitting in the gallery.
Kristin Smart's mom, Denise, took the stand on Thursday. She answered questions for 2.5 hours. Much of the testimony focused on what Kristin was doing right before she disappeared.
Denise Smart was the first person to take the stand. She was fighting back tears and all her emotions, going over the good memories of family vacations and photos, including Kristin's 1995 graduation picture, talking about how 2 months were spent in Hawaii while Kristin was a counselor before she attended Cal Poly after she graduated from high school. Denise spoke with Kristin every Sunday, except for the Sunday she went missing. And when the prosecution opened, they used the number 1,359 Sundays have happened since May 25th of 1996, when Kristin Smart was last seen alive. Pretty powerful. Denise went on to talk about how she last saw Kristin on Easter of 96 when she came home, and Kristin was thrilled to be with her family. She told her parents that Cal Poly was not a good fit for her. She was very close to her younger sister and brother, and she would cheer them on, telling them they'd go to the Olympics someday. Denise again broke down on the stand, crying when she recalled how Kristin never got to see her siblings go to the Olympic trials. Denise also tearfully reviewed her last letter to Kristin. She referred to the letter as, quote, "buckle up, buttercup," end quote. That type of letter. Kristin was struggling with biology at the time, her biology class, and Denise was encouraging her to take action to correct the problem and not to complain. The defense claimed the letter was sarcastic. The last time Denise heard her daughter's voice was on May 24th, 1996, when Kristin left a message saying she had good news. Denise went over the frustrating search for Kristin once the Cal Poly police had notified her that she was missing. Denise said she reached out to San Luis Obispo Police Department, San Luis Obispo Sheriff's Department, and even the FBI, but no one assumed responsibility. She said, quote, "The life of my daughter was of no value to anyone except for her family," end quote. Denise said Kristin had no debt and no bad relationships. Sanger, Paul's defense attorney, upon cross-examination, mentioned that not everything was rosy, using the example of Kristin's time at Vintage High School in Napa with her dad. And by the way, that's my hometown. I've previously mentioned that connection and why I feel so connected to her case, one of the many reasons. Stan was the principal at the high school at the time when Kristin attended as a junior there. Defense attorney Sanger also asked Denise about her knowledge of Kristin's nickname of Roxy. And in my opinion, I think she might have given herself that nickname because Kristin was a surfer. She loved the ocean. And Roxy's a popular surf, like bathing suit brand. So that's just a guess. I could be way off base there. But anyway, back to the details. Denise was not aware of the nickname. And she was also not aware that Kristin supposedly had modeling aspirations and at times would tell people she was a model, which is pretty common when you're blonde and super tall like that. People are going to assume you're a model. Just like tall guys, they always ask if you play basketball. So, I don't know, that just doesn't seem that big of a revelation or that important to me. Just my opinion. The Smart family did file a civil case, which was brought up during testimony. The civil suit was filed to get information. Both defense attorneys tried to paint Kristin as a liar. The Smart family was clearly not happy about the defense trying to make Kristin look bad. They talked about tips coming from Las Vegas and Florida as possible sightings of Kristin. And when Denise was done with her testimony, the counsel met with the judge briefly and announced that Denise could be called later to the stand.
The defense says you hired a lawyer after Kristin disappeared, says James Murphy. Yes, he erected the sign in the front yard regarding your daughter. And she says, correct. He sued the Flores family for information, she said. For money? The goal was not for money. It was for information. Money was not the focal point of the effort. So here really the defense just trying almost every different angle of possibility on cross-examination.
Who else testified today?
Well, the brother of Kristin Smart testified, Matt Smart.
Kristin's brother Matt testified next. He talked about family vacations, sports activities, traveling around the world, and all the fun that they would have, and the giant hole that's been left in the family without Kristin. He mentioned how close his family was. Ruben's attorney was not very happy with Matt and mentioned how he felt like he had to drag answers out of him. You could definitely feel the tension in the courtroom, according to people who were present during Kristin's brother Matt's testimony. I found another clip of him from last year as well that I'm going to insert here.
You spend a lot of time reflecting on what were the last words, what were the last experiences. There is never enough. And the hole that's left in you when you realize 25 years has gone by, it leaves you speechless.
A podcast on the Central Coast this past year sparked worldwide interest in the case, leading to new information and new tips. And that helped investigators get a murder charge for the boy she was last seen with, and his now 80-year-old father with accessory to murder. While the case makes its way through the court system, the family decided to focus on how to honor Kristin and give back to the community for all their support over the years by offering a scholarship program for young women to help them achieve their educational goals.
A great way to do that, given the high financial cost of college and what Kristin was aiming to pursue, which was a degree in architecture, it really seemed fitting to set up other local young women.
But their mother's personal experience following Kristin's disappearance helped expand the program.
My mom sat so many times at those resolute tables of gentlemen from law enforcement and forensic science. Women are critically underrepresented.
So the family decided to expand the scholarship program to also include young women who are trying to pursue a career in law enforcement and forensic science.
And for more information on the Kristin Smart Scholarship Program, go to kristinsmart.org.
Although we can't take cameras or record the audio and really the emotion that's coming through in this testimony, we did get to talk with a friend that has known this family that grew up in Stockton, and he was in the courtroom and really shared just how impactful the Smart family's statements were.
Yeah, it was almost a surreal moment, you know, to be in there after all these years. I wanted to come and support the family and support the community where I grew up, which is Stockton, and the high school that I graduated from, Lincoln High.
Like Kristin Smart, Clark Baird is Stockton born and raised. It's been more than 10,000 days since her last voice message. Not forgotten, Kristin's brother, Matt. A friend Baird told us he had mutual friends with and knew from swim and water polo. Similar ages at Lincoln High School. Now the two in the same room again. This time for his sister's murder trial.
It was pretty emotional for me listening to all their testimonies, you know, especially your brother Matt. You know, I have a lot of love and respect for him. He's a good man, and just to hear his testimony was powerful. It was powerful for me.
As well as the father, Stan Smart. In fact, Stan will still be on the stand tomorrow under cross-examination.
As she stated, Stan Smart was the next to testify. He went over the 3 months he spent searching for Kristin in San Luis Obispo. He followed leads, he interviewed people, he looked in dumpsters, culverts, woods, fields, wherever he could to find his missing daughter. The defense wanted Stan to explain why he drove to Ruben's white court home in Arroyo Grande. Stan explained it was because he learned Pual was the last person seen with Kristin. Ruben told Stan to leave because someone could get shot when he arrived at the home, so Stan left. You can really see the aging on Stan in his photograph of his testimony. Check out the phone he had to use way back in the day, searching for Kristin. Here he's in front of the dorms. I know he and his daughter were extremely close. It's such a tragic case. The whole thing just breaks your heart. Here they are at Kristin's Point in Shell Beach. I've done episodes regarding that as well.
And then just quickly, Stan Smart on the stand. He was probably the most assertive back and forth. He showed frustration quite a bit on cross.
Thursday, July 20th of 2022 was the first time both juries were in the court together. The juries are rotated from jury box to the galley and at times removed from the courtroom entirely, depending on the testimony being given at the time. In doing my hours of research, reading, watching, researching, comparing, going back to the beginning, the middle, and now here towards the end of as the trial proceeds, I have to admit I'm a little nervous as I hear the experts weigh in. They basically feel like the prosecution has an uphill battle. And the trial just started, for goodness sake. So I hope everybody keeps the faith and that justice is served and that they have enough to convict both Paul and Reuben for their crimes, and they're both sentenced to the maximum allowed by law. As we head into day 4, I wanted to touch on something that I found out in opening statements by the defense related to the Roxy thing that I was guessing on. It's along the similar lines. Apparently, Kristin claimed to be a Roxy model, which was the same brand of short shorts she wore that night she disappeared, along with the crop top she was wearing. The crop top wasn't Roxy, but according to Sanger, the defense attorney, he said that Kristin claimed to be a model for Roxy, which she actually was not. So it just kind of affirms sort of what I was guessing as far as the supposed nickname and the connection to the surf clothing, etc. Testimony on Friday continued with Stan Smart's testimony, who's Kristin's father. It was described to be a heated back and forth interaction during cross-examination with Paul's defense attorney. Sanger questioned Stan about the August 17, 1996 occurrence, where Stan confirmed he indeed followed the U-Haul that the Flores family was driving. And Stan said, quote, he was worried things were being taken from the house, end quote. Can you really blame the Smart family for the way they're feeling, especially with the defense trying to drag Kristin's name through the mud when enough damage has been done? She's already dead. It was said you could feel the tension in the courtroom as they interacted, and at one point, Stan claimed to be friendly as he was now. And the attorneys basically said they didn't feel like he was friendly, that he was actually being argumentative. This went on for a while, and you could cut the tension with a knife, according to those that were present at the time.
The defense today focused on a flyer that Stan said he distributed. It was red with the word warning in all caps at the top, a picture of Paul at 19 years old, and it noted he was the last person seen with Kristin. It listed his father's address and phone number and a $10,000 reward for tips in the case. And so the defense was trying to make the point that those flyers with the phone number and address posted led to people visiting the house and calling the home with death threats. His name is Stan. He faced questions today for an hour and a half, mainly from defense attorneys. He said Reuben's attorney was being very argumentative with him, badgering, he called it. And when talking about a time he drove by Paul's dad at Reuben's house, Stan said he introduced himself to Reuben with a very friendly demeanor, like it is now, Stan said. To which the attorney responded, I don't think it's very friendly.
After the Smart family is on the witness stand, we're expected then to get into some of the witnesses that were at that off-campus party 26 years ago that Kristin Smart was last seen leaving from. So still a lot of personal stories here left to go.
As stated, once the family was done testifying, some of the people that knew Kristin when she was a student at Cal Poly testified, starting with Vanessa Shields, who was Kristin's friend. She lived 2 doors down from Kristin in the dorm. She and other girls spent time together often. She mentioned she and Kristin were present at other college parties prior to her disappearance. She testified Paul would stare intently at Kristin. She said he was just a creepy guy. On cross-examination, she said over the years she believes Paul is guilty, especially once he was arrested. She said she recognized Paul's face on the flyers popping up around, and she knew he had something to do with her disappearance. Kristin was not interested in Paul. He was socially awkward and not Kristin's type, according to what Vanessa Shields said. She liked good-looking, athletic guys, according to Vanessa. Last time she saw Kristin was Friday morning before she went missing, as she left to spend Memorial Weekend in San Diego. They planned to catch up Monday night. When she returned, she saw Kristin's hairbrush, makeup, and items that wouldn't have been left behind. She wouldn't leave those for very long and hadn't been seen. Also, Kristin would not leave without telling anyone. So Vanessa and a few others who knew Kristin knew something was off and went to report it. Steve Fleming was the next to testify. He was one of Kristin's closest friends at Cal Poly. They hung out a lot and saw each other in the dorms. Steve noticed that Paul would linger around Kristin's dorm hall, which was Mirror Hall. Paul would try to get Kristin's attention, but Kristin was too nice and kind-hearted to tell him off, according to what Steve Fleming said in his testimony. Next to testify was another dorm mate of Kristin's. I remember hearing about her quite a bit in preliminary articles regarding Kristin's disappearance. Her name is Margarita Campos. She said she saw Paul being, quote, unnaturally interested in Kristin, end quote. She said he would make the group uncomfortable, but as also stated by Steve Fleming, Kristin was just way too nice to tell him off or be mean. It's interesting to know how much he was actually stalking her prior. I didn't realize it was to this extent. The final witness on Friday, July 22nd, 2022, was Kinder Coed. She actually seemed like she was on the stand the longest because the reporters covered more of what she said than anyone else. So, she actually attended a local community college, Cuesta College, back in May of 1996. She walked the courtroom through the sequence of events she witnessed at 135 Crandall Way, which was the party that Kristin was at. She was asking around the party for gum, and Paul said he did have some. She then pointed to Paul, saying he was the guy he said he had the gum in the courtroom. She still recognized him after all these years. I was shocked and yet not surprised at the same time when Kendra went on to say that Paul started kissing her and that it was not consensual. Paul said the gum was in his car and attempted to kiss her again, which she had to push him off again for a second time. After she stopped him, she went back to the party and told her friends about what Paul had done. She also spoke about being uncomfortable when Paul fell on top of Kristin at the party. And we've heard several people mention this, guys. Several witnesses at the party. Because it was like a loud bang and like everybody stopped what they were doing and looked over. It was quite an ordeal from what the witnesses said. Okay, moving on to her testimony. She talked about helping Kristin on the front porch for fresh air and sat with Kristin for a few minutes. She explained to the prosecutor that Kristin, quote, didn't seem sober, end quote. She talked about how she warned Kristin to stay away from Paul, and Kristin said her name was Roxy. When Kendra was leaving, she saw Kristin laying in the driveway. She offered her a ride, and Kristin said she already had a ride. During cross-examination, the prosecution objected when Sanger, who was Paul's defense attorney, showed a screenshot showing that Kendra and podcast maker of Your Own Backyard, Chris Lambert, followed each other. The objection was based on private information that may be contained in it. The judge overruled the objection since no private information was present. She spoke on her interview in episode 2 of the podcast series. Sanger asked her if Lambert, the podcast creator, was dedicated to Paul's conviction. She responded saying, "He is dedicated to finding justice for Kristin's family." Ruben's attorney asked about how the day after her August 2nd, 2021 interview, she changed her Facebook picture, her profile picture to be more specific. And in that profile picture, she was wearing purple, which has been known to be a symbol for justice for Kristin. She admitted she changed her profile, but had no comment on the significance of wearing purple. And you may also recall there was a big hubbub earlier in the preliminary hearings where the defense attorney was upset because the prosecution was wearing purple ties in solidarity with Kristin, and they didn't think it was appropriate, and they had all these objections and stuff regarding that.
Prosecutors say Pual was trying to rape Kristin Smart at Cal Poly after a party when he killed her Memorial Day weekend in 1996, and then had his dad, Ruben, help him bury the body, which has never been found.
There was another piece of evidence that I really would like to see and look forward to the day we do get to see it, but I can imagine it in my mind. So it was testimony regarding a creepy video that they played in court for the jury. It was a home video, and it was for an Arroyo Grande High School graduation party, which took place only days after Kristin disappeared. The mom, who was recording, panned the camera to Pual at the party and asked, quote, "Hey, Pual, what do you know about that missing girl? What did you do to her?" End quote. Pual replied, quote, "Nothing," end quote. He turned away from the camera at that point. The video was described as very eerie. I can just imagine, can't you? The trial is set to resume on Monday, July 25th, 2022. Justice for Kristin.
If I can't keep my head held high enough, I'll just speak love and watch the smiles come.
Thanks for watching.
Bring my spirits up.
Don't forget to stop and smell the flowers.
There's some shit I like to fix, but I still know that I'm blessed.